It's not what happens to you that defines you, but how you react to it. This reflection by Epicurus highlights the importance of a conscious approach in relationships. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, we may find that some people are not ready or willing to change, remaining trapped in their own mental patterns or limiting beliefs. In these cases, continuing to insist can turn into a useless effort, which drains energy and undermines one's emotional balance. This video explores 7 types of people who can be counterproductive to persist in trying to offer help. Knowing when to stop is key to protecting your balance. To keep in touch, you can subscribe to the channel if you also leave a "like I thank you infinitely." Enjoy. The first category concerns those who live immersed in a perpetual lament, as if the world were a theater in which every scene was a drama with no way out. These people seem to perceive reality through a distorting lens, where every challenge turns into an insurmountable obstacle, and every experience is seen as a confirmation of their bad luck. This attitude, often fueled by a deep-rooted habit of pessimism, creates a vicious cycle in which verbal outbursts replace action, stifling any possibility of real transformation. From a philosophical point of view, this inclination could be interpreted as an implicit refusal to take responsibility for one's own existence. As Seneca pointed out, it is not because things are difficult that we do not dare, but because we do not dare that they are difficult. Complaining then becomes a convenient escape, a defense mechanism that prevents us from looking inside ourselves and facing our share of responsibility for the problems that arise. Neuroscience, in this sense, teaches us that the brain is highly plastic and tends to strengthen neural pathways that are repeated over time. This means that those who constantly complain train their mind to recognize only the negative aspects of life, ignoring opportunities for growth or workable solutions. Interacting with people living with this condition can be a deeply distressing experience. Their energy, often full of frustration and victimhood, risks undermining the inner balance of those who try to help them. If these people prove impervious to any of our help, it becomes essential to draw clear boundaries. Sometimes, the only truly effective help is to let them go on their own journey, finding their own direction. It is a choice that requires courage and clarity, because preserving one's serenity is essential to continue to be a resource for those who truly want to grow. The second category is that of the egocentric individuals for whom the universe seems to orbit exclusively around their own desires and needs. It is as if every action, every thought, every word was measured and calibrated according to one's own advantage or well-being. They live in a reality where I is the center of everything, and what happens to them or around them is interpreted through that personal lens. This behavior brings to mind the theories of Schopenhauer, who spoke of man as a being capable of seeing reality only through the filter of his own pain, his own desires, and his own egoistic perception. From a scientific point of view, the human brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, plays a fundamental role in managing social relationships and empathy. Neuroscience says that an egocentric mind is less capable of activating the brain areas involved in empathy, that is, the ability to put oneself in someone else's shoes and recognize their value. Interacting with a self-centered person can be a frustrating experience, and in the long run, without adequate detachment, it can be even more debilitating. The third category concerns a figure as fascinating as it is complex: the opportunists. These individuals move through life with an ever-active radar, ready to pick up on any opportunity for personal gain or advantage. Their ability to recognize and exploit opportunities, if calibrated with balance and respect, can be seen as a virtue, a sort of practical intelligence that distinguishes them. But if this attitude slides into unscrupulous selfishness, the line between skill and manipulation becomes blurred, leading to often deleterious consequences in relationships. Philosophically speaking, the opportunist embodies a utilitarian view of life, in which the value of each choice is measured in terms of immediate benefits. Aristotle taught that the most authentic bonds cannot flourish if the focus of the relationship is a constant calculation of what one can get from the other. Psychology, on the other hand, teaches that opportunistic behavior is often rooted in a primal need for security. Advantage seeking can be interpreted as a response to unconscious fears, such as uncertainty or scarcity of resources. In the context of personal relationships, the opportunist may initially appear affable and even charming, thanks to his ability to capture the right moment, to propose himself, or to insert himself into a favorable situation. But here too, it is in the long term that this relational strategy tends to reveal its darkest side. Those who interact with an opportunist may feel used. To protect yourself from this, you need to develop a healthy capacity for discernment. That is, one should carefully observe their motives, their methods, and their behaviors. As philosopher Immanuel Kant suggests, treat others as an end, never as a means. This is the key to distinguishing between those who know how to seize opportunities with respect and those who instead use them to manipulate or overwhelm. The fourth category is represented by those who never admit their mistakes. They live in a carefully constructed dimension where every mistake is denied, minimized, or attributed to external factors. It is as if they have put on armor, a protective shell that isolates them from constructive confrontation and deprives them of the possibility of growing through self-analysis. From a philosophical point of view, this inclination to deny one's own limits recalls the ancient Greek concept of hybris, a form of excessive pride that leads the individual to ignore his own frailties and to challenge the limits imposed by reality. In contrast, philosophers such as Socrates emphasize the importance of recognizing one's ignorance as the first step toward wisdom. In psychology, this characteristic is associated with low self-esteem or past experiences characterized by judgment and punishment. Growing up in an environment where mistakes are shamed or punished severely can lead to the development of a defensive mentality, where admitting a mistake is equivalent to questioning one's value as an individual. Furthermore, studies on cognitive dynamics show that these people tend to justify their mistakes rather than accept them. Despite their apparent safety, they live a fragile existence, trapped in a narrative of perfection that requires an enormous expenditure of energy to maintain. Their inability to confront their own mistakes separates them from others, creating an invisible wall that makes it difficult to establish authentic and reciprocal relationships. Interacting with someone who refuses to admit their mistakes can be extremely complex. Every attempt to stimulate reflection or dialogue is shattered by a barrier of justifications, denials, and sometimes accusations. However, this attitude is not immutable. With patience and will, it is possible to chip away at the armor of infallibility, but only if the person himself is willing to lower his defenses and look at himself honestly. Ultimately, we can say that the ability to recognize one's mistakes is one of the most humble and powerful acts an individual can perform. In fifth place, we find those who do not keep their promises. Breaking your word is an act that deeply undermines the thin fabric of trust, that essential component that makes any healthy relationship possible. A promise, when not kept, becomes a double-edged sword. It hurts the one who received it and erodes the credibility of the one who made it. From a philosophical perspective, the promise is much more than a momentary commitment. It is a symbol of responsibility. As Friedrich Nietzsche said, "A noble man is one who promises and keeps his promises." The moment you give your word, you build an invisible bridge between what is and what should be. But when that bridge collapses, your very sense of personal integrity is compromised. On a scientific level, psychology highlights how breaking promises has a tangible effect on the emotions and self-esteem of those who suffer it. Studies on the dynamics of trust show that when a commitment is not respected, the brain reacts by perceiving a sort of emotional micro-trauma. This leads to a loss of trust in others, but also to negative introspection. One wonders why one chose to believe in that person, ending up doubting one's own judgment. The result is a slow erosion, not only of relationships, but also of one's inner security. It is essential to understand that it is not possible to force someone to respect what they do not feel is a duty. Again, setting clear boundaries becomes an act of protection for your own well-being. In sixth place, we find those who refuse change. These people live in a sort of protective bubble, anchored to their habits and beliefs, unable or unwilling to explore new stimuli. This refusal is a passive resistance, a barrier capable of stifling innovation and impeding growth, both personal and collective. Philosophically, this obstinacy recalls the condition described by Heraclitus, according to which no one can step into the same river twice, since reality is constantly changing. To reject change is, in a sense, to deny the fluid and impermanent nature of existence itself. From a scientific point of view, the refusal to change can be explained by a phenomenon known as status quo bias. Humans naturally tend to prefer the familiar, since the brain interprets stability as a guarantee of safety. When faced with new situations, areas of the brain linked to fear and uncertainty, such as the amygdala, are activated, often leading to a total shutdown response. Those who refuse change often do so not out of malice or laziness, but out of fear. Fear of losing control, of failure, or of having to face the unknown. This fear leads them to defend their beliefs as if they were immovable foundations, even at the cost of sacrificing any good opportunities. And this defense, in the long run, distances them from the people who try to help them. Interacting with them leads to a sense of frustration, because every attempt to propose a new idea or perspective is met with skepticism, and often with an outright rejection. Yet not all people who resist change are hopelessly closed off. Some may need more time to process and accept new things. In these cases, an empathetic and patient approach can make the difference, offering support without forcing. But when resistance becomes an impenetrable armor, it is important to recognize one's limits and not exhaust one's energies in fruitless attempts. The seventh category is reserved for the chronically undecided. Every choice, even the most trivial, becomes an insurmountable task for them. They remain stuck in uncertainty, paralyzed by the fear of making a mistake. Philosophically, Kierkegaard described this condition as existential anguish, the vertigo one feels when faced with the freedom to choose. Psychologically, they may be victims of excessive activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for evaluating options. Helping them becomes complicated, as every piece of advice seems to amplify their confusion rather than alleviate it. Recognizing these people, these relationships, and the various dynamics allows you to protect your balance and your time. Let me know how many people you know with these characteristics. That's all for now. See you soon.